and Dr. Wai Keong Wong is the Chief Research Information Officer at UCLH Hospital, as well as a consultant hematologist. And so is going to tell us about the work that is happening at UCLH around clinical informatics. So I will leave it to you.
Thank you, Emily. I'm just going to share my PowerPoint. Everything looks okay from your point of view?
Perfect. Yes, I can see everything really well.
All right. So perfect. Thanks for the opportunity to present. And Emily, if you can literally just stop me at 14 minutes, I'll appreciate it, just in case I ramble on a bit. So, I'm Wai Keong, I'm a hematology consultant. Just kind of following on from Peter's talk, actually, it's quite interesting. So I have my FRCP because of my consultant hematology, but I'm also a fellow of the Faculty of Clinical Informatics, which is a new faculty created specifically for people like myself, Peter, and others who have a joint interest now between kind of traditional medicine and also clinical informatics. So just something to reflect on, and please look up the FCI. So now I'm going to talk today about research informatics. Just to complicate matters, if clinical informatics is a new thing, research informatics is even newer. And so it's actually a sub-discipline of clinical informatics. And really it has, I think, three components, and this is how I describe it to people. It's about the use of digital technologies to support the delivery of clinical trials, all the way from feasibility, recruiting patients, the collection of the data afterwards in the data lifecycle. But an increasingly area that is increasing a lot is around the data itself. As we all have electronic health record systems, we are now awash with digitally collected information. What is the science about taking that information and making it available for insights and research? And of course, the third part about it is to bring in new tools to enhance the first two. So today I'll be talking less about the clinical trials aspect, but but concentrate more around the data. So this is an area that's actually extremely important to UCLH. And this is UCLH has a vision to become a research hospital. And the gentleman that you see on my slide is Professor Brian Williams, who's the director of our BRC. And I stole this slide from him because he uses this in a lot of his talks when he's trying to explain to people what does it mean to be a research hospital. It's a hospital that just does not do research, but it is where research, innovation, and data science is integral to everything it does. So it's not about just having an R&D department, but it's about having all the thinking and the methodology around doing research embedded into everything we do at UCLH. And it is about pursuing relentless innovation informed by its own data. And that's important. It's quite different from implementing a guideline or a finding from a clinical trial that has been done in a different country, but actually about looking at our own data and seeing, is there something that we should be doing differently specifically for our organization? We should make use of data that we collect about every individual patient and every element of data. Is an ambition. We can't do that at the moment, but that's definitely the ambition. And by definition, therefore, we become a learning hospital. And in every decision we make about how to run the hospital and how we treat the patient, we should start moving away from saying, I think this is what we should do, but instead move towards, I know this is what we should do because this is what our data tells us. Now, I think, Emily, you mentioned earlier, and I think Peter as well, that Great Ormond Street and UCLH have implemented an electronic health record system last year. And what this does is take us up the digital maturity scale. We've moved from paper to digital. But it does not mean that just because we implemented an EPR, that we are actually using the data any differently. So whilst we have gone up the digital maturity scale, if we don't do anything more than just implement an electronic health record system, we do not go up the analytical maturity scale. So one of the tasks of research informatics and in my role is to help the organization move up the analytical maturity scale. And my talk will be talking a little bit about the kind of things that we are doing to achieve this aim. So to move up the analytical maturity scale, it is not something that UCLH can do by itself. We are a hospital. We don't traditionally have a lot of analytics capabilities within the hospital itself. So we need to have a method to work with our academic partners, to work with commercial partners, and to work with people within the hospital that have analytical skills. So we need to take the friction away from the ability to do data research in the NHS. So first things first is governance. Anyone who's ever tried to get access to data, healthcare data, realize that there's many layers of governance, from information governance to research governance, that needs to be conducted before you even gain access to data. You know, if UCLH is serious about analytical maturity, we need to help people navigate this. The tools that people use for data science are not tools that are generally available in the NHS. In the NHS, analytical tool equals Excel. Excel is not really a data science tool. So we need to have a way of provisioning tools like Python, R, and so on within the NHS. We need to have a way that people can access this information without having to be on site. Because if being on site is such a key thing, we restrict the amount of people that we can work with. Our data is currently specific to our own electronic health record system. This means that data scientists needs to come and understand how we collect our data, how our particular EHR does it, and then makes it also really, really difficult for them to do comparative research with other organizations. So we need to create a data asset that removes this layer away from the researchers so that they have access to an open data model, which they can also, that is widely used. So one thing we've done is that we start the process of converting our data into this more harmonized international data standard called OMOP, which I believe is used in loads of countries around the world, and last count as nearly 1 billion health records that has been normalized to that. And this is really to support the fair data principles that some of you may have heard of about. If you haven't heard of it, just Google it and read about it. But also about this aim about reproducible research, which is becoming increasingly important. A lot of our data is not live, and it's retrospective data, and that's fine for a lot of purposes. But we also recognize that if you want to implement like predictive models to do things like detect patient deterioration, we need to have a live data pipeline to serve these models. So that's something we're also creating. So a lot of this we have actually put under the development of something called our experimental medicine application platform, which we call short EMAP. And when Brian talks about this to external organizations, he calls EMAP our Epic Plus, the additional infrastructure that we need to put in place to bring us up the analytical maturity scale. And what's interesting about EMAP is that it's been created in partnership with the UCL research engineering team. Yeah. And I think I think Jonathan is here. So if you'd like to know a bit more about how his team has been working with UCLH to develop EMAP, please of course get in touch with him. And finally, something that I think that we all kind of know for any clinicians that work with EHRs, a lot of the interesting data and important data is trapped in free text and not in structured information. So we felt that if we really want to gain as much value of the data we collect, we need to provide tools that also can do free text analysis. And I'll show you some screenshots later on. So how have this affected our COVID-19 response? Now, we only started this journey about 1 to 2 years ago. So we don't have absolutely everything in place. But what we did have, we tried to deploy during this COVID-19 pandemic. The data science desktop. This was made available literally just weeks before the COVID pandemic started. This provides all those data science tools, the Python, the R, the access to databases, in a virtual environment that people can access from anywhere. So for a lot of our informatics teams, from our data scientists, they can continue working. I don't pretend that it's perfect, but it meant that a lot of projects can be supported. We were able to also onboard researchers from UCL to help with some of the analysis and provide them tools within this environment. probably won't be surprised to you, we started getting lots and lots of data requests for research and service evaluation projects related to COVID-19. So very quickly spun up a governance structure called the Data Access Committee that we brought together information governance, research governance, and information services so that we can review a lot of it. And to date, we've reviewed nearly 65 to 70 different requests. This COVID-19 has also forced research informatics to work much closer with the informatics information services of the trust. And I think our relationship will never be the same again. And our vendor Epic has also been invaluable in this, and has provided a lot of services for free during this time. Now, we also had a vision that we want to learn from the data, learn from the routinely collected data from UCLH about COVID. But we didn't want to just restrict this to UCLH data. We want to join partners with different hospitals. So we've set up something called DeCOVID, which is a consortium that includes data from UCLH and Birmingham. And one thing we did do is try to harmonize our EHR data so you have interoperability between data across hospitals. And we have just about successfully done them, and I'll show you what we have achieved. So the screenshot you see here is basically our data request portal. So we call it DEX. It's meant to stand for Data Explorer. We don't actually have much data to explore yet, but what it does function is a single channel for UCLH people to request data. And you can see the button there. What you can see here is each row, it represents a table in OMOP, which is the standard that we have mapped to. And I just wanted to share with you that this is all the inpatient data at UCLH transformed into OMOP format. And basically we have over, like for example, here you can see we have 73,000 patients in this data set. And we have 3 million drug exposures. What does that mean, 3 million drug exposures? That means that we have over 3 million events of a drug given to a patient. And for every single event, we have data harmonized to an international standard. So here you can see that paracetamol is the most used tablet. And this, even though you can see it in English, this is behind that is actually a code. I could give my data to someone who doesn't speak English in China or Brazil. They could use it to do comparative research. So we feel that this is the, and University Hospitals Birmingham have done exactly the same thing. And we think this is the first demonstration of large scale harmonization of EHR data in the NHS to an international standard that we are aware of. Using the same data, we can generate graphs such as this. So you can see the moment COVID hit around March and April, our A&E emissions completely dropped to about 20%, and it's not even back to normal yet. When we did the same graph in Birmingham, Birmingham have actually recovered back to normal and has gone above. So lots of interesting things there. We can do comparative research quite easily. I'll skip this slide. So the other thing we've done is to implement free text capability. What you see here is a front end called Kibana, which is an open source tool that sits on top of an Elasticsearch database. So we've loaded all of our free text nodes into this database. And it's part of this suite of products called CogStack, which is originated in King's College Hospital, but the main kind of lead to this, Professor Dobson, is also kind of employed at UCL. So all I did literally was type the word COVID, and it searched across, I don't know how many, there you go, 300,000, 220,000, or more than that. These are just the hits. It's mentioned at least 200,000+ times in our notes. And you can see as time progressed how it went up and suddenly it all disappeared, but you can see that it's starting to come back again. It's just a mention of the word. But this is just free text searching. In addition to that, we've implemented natural language processing, which is able to extract concepts out of free text and give it meaning. So here's just an excerpt of a patient's free text note. Of course, you can see I got rid of a lot of information for privacy reasons. See, the computer actually found SOB as shortness of breath and given it a concept of dyspnea with a SNOMED concept in the back end. So I just want to show you that we have lots of projects using this technology, and we're continuing to refine them. And this technology has also been recently, myself and others have got an NHSX AI grant to push this technology to the front end for clinicians to use. What I'm showing you here is also another piece of thing that we built at UCLH, which is to give the public and clinicians a registry of clinical studies that are being conducted at UCLH. But what's fascinating is that we've managed to at least create on the proof of concept, embed this within our electronic patient record. So this patient, fake patient, Anna Blue Whale, has on her diagnosis list lung cancer, and I'm able to link lung cancer into my trial registry and pass on the information and show the clinical trials that she may be suitable for right within our EPR. So I've talked a lot about this, so these are the examples of what I have just I've shown you. But we've also implemented the live data pipeline with a lot of help from the UCL Research Engineering, and that's something that we think is quite unique in the NHS and can provide quite a lot of research opportunities that others may not be able to. But we've learned a lot of lessons during COVID. First thing is, we are drowning in the number of data requests that we are receiving. Remember that the information services team at UCLH was kind of created prior to implementation of a fully integrated electronic health record system, and their main customers were really the administrative staff of the hospital. With Epic, we now have lots of clinical data, but we have the same amount of staff. Clinical data is also very different from appointment data. So we've realized that we have, even though we create a beautiful process for people to request data, we are struggling to meet the demand. The second point is interesting. So I think a lot of people, when they request data from us, do not understand the difference between what's a routinely collected data and data curated specifically for research. Data curated specifically for research usually involve a human being sitting in front of either a paper or electronic record and making decisions such as, does the patient have an active diagnosis of cancer? Are they actively receiving chemotherapy? And these kind of things are not collected in that kind of clean way in the electronic health record system, but needs to be derived. And I think this is a journey that we need to go on. And even things that seem quite simple, like, is the patient on a ventilator and how long were they ventilated for? Using routinely collected data is not as simple, and you need to probably write rules to say, for example, if they have this and this field filled in 3 times in a row over 6 hours, they are probably on a ventilator. And I'll just skip the last lessons learned. So what's the plan for the next year? We want to create a construct called the UCLH Research Database and a patient-governed data access committee to govern research access to it. We have a really fascinating clinical data science program where our charity and our BRC has funded 16 clinicians to spend a year where half the time they'll be doing data science projects. We will continue building our OMOP5 interoperable data asset. We continue to strengthen the governance between research informatics and the digital healthcare directorate. And this is very important for the ability of taking things that we might develop in research, but implementing it in real life. And on AI, we have 3 AI fellows who are working with our analytics team, and also under the guidance and leadership of Professor Nachev, who will be speaking later. So maybe I'll just end here to say that, actually, I don't want to miss the last slide because this is important. So in the pursuit of data science at UCLH, we cannot forget our patients because it is their data that we're dealing with. So when we talk about the research hospital, we need to make it meaningful to our patients and the citizens. And the way that I'm planning to frame this is to say that we commit to maximizing opportunities for them to take part in research. We'll learn from the data, and we will involve them in designing number 1 and 2. And then we'll measure our success against these commitments. Not quite sure how we're going to do this yet, but that's the plan. So any questions, that's my email. And just to say that I think we're just about open for business. So if you have an interesting research idea, you want to do a research project with us, especially if you come with grant money as well, you're very, very welcome. So I'll leave it as that.
Great. Thank you so much for that, Wai. And it's good that you mentioned the patients, because actually as a late addition, some of you might have noticed, we do have Roz Yu, who is the head of PPIE for UCLH BRC, is going to be coming to speak to us at the end of, she's the last speaker today, about how they are going forward with Your Data, Our Challenge around
Yep.
engaging patients with the data collection. So that's great that you mentioned that. One of the questions we had earlier, which didn't get answered, which I thought I'd put to you, Wai, is, are there any detractions or concerns from using these technologies? I know we've learned a number of lessons, but and we talk a lot about the positives, but have you found any of concerns going forward with this line of work?
So Emily, are you referring to the use of electronic health record systems, or more like the use of kind of AI-based tools? Because I'm not sure when I saw that question, I didn't quite get which bit of it. Is it the concern about?
Yeah, okay. If the anonymous person who posted this question would like to clarify that in the crowd, please do, because I'm not sure. That's a good point. I guess one of the concerns is, from reading I've done, would be around how do we stop potential biases being replicated by AI? Is that something that you've thought about at all? As we collect a lot of data, but we also, humans collect the data. So there can sometimes be that inherent bias in the raw data.
Yes, absolutely. I guess those are two separate things, isn't it? There's a interestingly, biases in routinely collected data itself I think is an area of research, because obviously biases, so when you mean by biases, it could be the way data is collected, the fact that data is not recorded at all, could be due to some form of inherent bit in the way we practice. So we have to be really careful that we are not disadvantaging a particular population because data wasn't collected about them at all. So one of the main, and absolutely for AI predictive algorithms, this is a big issue. And I said, Paresh Kev later might talk a little bit about this, but when in conversation with his fellows, when they are explaining to me about the projects they are doing, that's front and center of a lot of the analysis they do to ensure that any algorithm and anything that is created does not accidentally disadvantage particular subpopulations of patients. So it's a real problem, and every time we assess any kind of model, it's something that needs to be taken into consideration.
Okay, great. So the next question that just come up on Slido is about increasing participation of all clinicians in this role. I am also aware that our next talk is from a clinician who has moved into the role of a clinical informatician. But do you have a final thought on how we can increase participation of all clinicians in this?
Yes, I think there's two ways of doing this. Every time as part of, and when I say clinicians, and unfortunately I have a slight bias towards the medical profession because that's kind of where I understand most. But every time a clinician does an audit or a project, now there's an increasing ability to involve projects that has a digital slant. For example, it could be improving the front end of your particular data entry screen. It could be about using the data for your department and using it to help drive service improvement. So that could be like your initial way in, right? But then increasingly, you will see a lot more digital fellowships created kind of nationally. And for example, at UCLH, we've got this data science fellow programs that we're starting off. And so I would say to keep an eye out of it. Join the faculty of clinical informatics. The associate memberships are very, 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 very affordable, and that gives you an ability to see what's happening around the area of clinical informatics. In terms of time neutralness, I'm not entirely sure what that means, except that maybe it means that that it is paid for rather than kind of free. It's not extra on top of what you practice clinically. I think the way to do that is to just embed digital as part of existing projects that you're going to have to do anyway. But I think to develop skills and knowledge to make this a kind of specialty interest, there's no substitute for actual dedicated time. So PhD fellowships and things like that, and maybe not too distant future, a formalized training program.
Great. Thank you so much. We will put your email address in the chat, or you might share it there.